The United Auto Workers Union expanding its strike again, this time hitting Ford's biggest truck building plant in Kentucky. It is the automaker's most profitable plant, bringing in around $25 billion each year. Analysts have previously said the strike hasn't been that concerning because truck plants have been spared until now. David Whiston, Auto's equity strategist and Morningstar Research, joins us now. So, David, let me ask you, this feels like a fairly significant escalation here. Is this how you saw it?
Yes, definitely. This is basically with the Detroit 3, it's all about full-size SUVs and pickup trucks. And with Kentucky Truck, you're really going after both because you're getting part of the F-Series franchise with the Super Duty production, and then also Expedition and Lincoln Navigator. Probably not a surprise given last week the UAW said they were on the verge of striking GM Arlington, Texas, where they make all their full-size SUVs. So unfortunately, there's probably more to come on this as soon as tomorrow.
I mean, David, what does this tell us about what's going on behind the scenes in the negotiations? Does it signal that there's not progress and that's why the UAW felt like it had to make this move? And does this then in turn put more pressure on Ford and really, get them to make a deal?
Yeah, Ford had a press conference actually just before we went on the air here, and I was listening to it, and they, from the Ford perspective, they thought they were making progress on issues like the battery JV plants and retirement benefits. The union clearly feels differently, and I think the union's just taking a more absolutist approach of if we don't get what we want, we just keep escalating the strike. And this week it's full-size SUVs, and then I think now that we're into the most lucrative vehicles and probably Ford's most profitable plant, this plant does roughly $5 billion a year in EBIT for Ford. The question that, and hopefully management has already made a decision here, but what they need to do at all three firms is decide, do they want to end this strike soon and perhaps give in to avoid the bleeding in pickups and full-size SUVs? Or are they willing to wait this out? And to wait it out, they're going to have to lever up the company probably. And the math is, I think, on their side to do that, but you have to take a lot more debt. That's going to in turn drive your stock price down quite a bit.
And David, this latest action by the UAW, in addition to financial implications for Ford, are there ripple effects for suppliers as well?
Yeah, that's a very underrated aspect of this strike. I mean, the UAW, of course, cares about its own members, but there's so much ramifications, not just in the auto supply chain, but throughout the whole broader U.S. economy. I mean, generally, an auto manufacturing job is roughly a multiplier effect to me as much as 8 to 10 other jobs in the economy beyond the auto sector. Just in the supplier space, trade organization this week is saying that 30% of suppliers at the Detroit 3 have done layoffs. They think that percentage, I think, is going up quite a bit, maybe doubling, if I remember right, very shortly. And those workers, they're not going to come back to work. The supplier side and everyone else impacted by the strike directly or indirectly, they're not going to come back to work eventually with a fat new contract like the UAW workers will. They're just going to get to come back to work. And then things like restarting plants, these smaller suppliers, they have negative working capital for them to restart. They may not have the funds on hand to do that. There's been the trade organizations are asking President Biden to give some money to suppliers who have under 200 million in revenue. We have to watch this pretty carefully because it's not going to be Lear or Magna, a big tier 1 supplier, that's going to take down Toyota and everyone else. It's going to be some random tier 2, tier 3 supplier that nobody's heard of, if it happens.
When you say explain to me exactly what you're saying here, David. If one of these suppliers you're saying might run out of money, might run out of operating funds at some point if their largest customer is not taking orders, and then maybe they go out of business, maybe there's a ripple effect. Is that what you're outlining here?
Basically, yes. A very small supplier, which generally in auto industry parlance is called the tier 3 supplier. So tier 1 supply to the automakers, and you go upstream from there. They can go multiple layers all the way generally to a tier 3. The tier 3 could run out of money. They could run out of labor. Those are people who have been shut down because of the strike. They need to work, so maybe they left the company. And then to restart, it can be very difficult if you don't have the funds or the people. And then on the actual production, to your question, this is where I've said in the past, this is not just a Detroit 3 problem or just a Midwest problem, because that tier 3 supplier feeds a tier 2 supplier, feeds a tier 1 supplier who feeds the Detroit 3 and Toyota, Hyundai, Kia, Honda, everybody else. or a lot of the other firms that aren't UAW, it can impact all of North American auto production potentially. But I'm not saying we're on the verge of that, but that risk is there.
David, I'll get you out of here on this. I'm just curious who you think has leverage right now in this fight. You know, I look at UAW, Sean Fain, and he's seeing the same polls I am. There's a recent one from the AP, David, saying a majority of Americans support higher pay for auto workers. He knows he's got the President of the United States on his side. Biden has shown clear solidarity there. And given this targeted strategy he has of when to strike, he's not exhausting his strike fund. Do you think Fain actually is in pole position here? Who has the leverage?
Yeah, I think that goes back to what we were just talking about. It depends. Do the automakers, are they willing to let the strike go a long time and lever up the company? If so, I think the automakers ultimately have the upper hand, even though right now I think it does look like the union's winning because they keep getting more concessions. But as the union keeps escalating, that increases the depletion rate on the strike fund to the point where if you shut down all the Detroit 3 at once, even when the strike fund was full, you had, I think, roughly 6 or 8 weeks. I can't remember the number exactly of calc, but $500 a week of strike pay, even if they're not paying healthcare, $500 a week of strike pay, $825 million to start. That depletes very quickly when you're talking about roughly 146,000 people. So it just depends on, will the automakers be willing to let the strike go a long time, or do they want to end this soon? But if you're talking, in order to end it soon, if you have to do things like pensions, retire your healthcare, I don't think they're willing to do that because they know it's going to kill them.
David, really helpful perspective here. I mean, we've heard all the big numbers about the strike, but it's really great to get sort of the breakdown of the costs of this and not just for the big three themselves. Thanks a lot, David.
Thank you.